Hello, good evening, everybody. How are you? Hope you are doing well. So, I'm Dr. Abdul Had. Today, we are going to discuss about the first lecture class for QQRM, Quantitative and Qualitative Research Method. So, my consultation hour for this trimester will be on Monday from 9 to 11 and Thursday from 2 to 4 p.m. So my room is H101, but unfortunately this trimester we cannot see you since we are going to do or we have online learning. So you could email me. Also, you can visit the YouTube channel for more videos related to research methods. So today we are going to talk about a qualitative research method, an introduction to qualitative research method. What is qualitative research method? So a qualitative research involves finding out what people think and how they feel, or at any rate, what they say they think and how they say they feel. So this kind of information is subjective. It involves feeling and impression rather than numbers. So put it in a simple way, qualitative research is about words rather than numbers. Interviewing people, understanding their feeling, their perception, their beliefs, and do research based on that feeling, that perception, or that knowledge. But before we go straight to the qualitative, I would like to give a quick comparison between qualitative and quantitative research. So, what is quantitative now research? Is a formal, objective, systematic process in which numerical data are utilized to obtain information about the words and the research method which is used to describe and test relationship and examine cause and effect relationship. This based on Burns and Grove 1987. So make it simple, it is a systematic scientific investigation of data and their relationship. You gather data, numerical data, you will have a scientific investigation or a scientific method. We will see this later, how we are going to do it. And you come out to find a relationship between variables, between objects. So this is what we call a quantitative. So the difference between qualitative and quantitative, the first qualitative is gathering data, but that data is in terms of feeling, beliefs, and experience, which is words. But in quantitative, we gather data, but this data is about numbers. So here we have a quick comparison. In qualitative research, we have multiple realities because the knowledge that we are gaining from multiple people, groups, telling us their feeling, their experiences. But in quantitative, it is a single reality. After we gather this numerical data, we will find a single reality. There is a relationship between A and B or no. Is it positive or no? And in qualitative, the reality is socially constructed since the data is gathered from people which are more social, in their nature. But in quantitative, it is the reality is objective. Means that we deal with numbers, and while we have gotten, the conclusion, it isn't objective because if it is, we found that there is a positive relationship, that is a positive relationship. Then in the qualitative, the reality is context interrelated, whereas in quantitative, the reality is context free. But in qualitative is a holistic because we talk about the whole, but in quantitative is reductionistic, where we we start from the theory, from the general, and we start deducting until we reach the specific. In qualitative, a strong philosophical perspective. We use our philosophies, our understanding, our logic to develop actually theories. But in quantitative, it is strong theoretical base. We must have a strong theoretical base. We must have a theory, a concept to explain for us that phenomenon. Then we do an investigation to confirm that theory or no. In qualitative, reasoning is inductive. We start from a specific and we go to general. We start from observations and then we develop hypotheses and theories. But in quantitative, reasoning is deductive, where we start from the general and we go to the specific. Start from the theories and we come to a specific or confirm that theory or no. And in qualitative, the discovery of meaning is the basis of knowledge. Your respondent, will drive you to that knowledge. But in the quantitative is cause and effect relationship are the base of knowledge. That numbers that we gather will tell us what is the relationship between the variables. Or is variable A, cause or or affect a variable B or no. So as I say, in qualitative, we develop theories, but in quantitative, we test the theory if it is, this theory valid or no. Then we have also in qualitative, a theory developed during the study, but in quantitative, the theory is already developed, before we conduct study. The qualitative, the meaning, of concept. People talk about things, about the experience, and we give a meaning about those concepts. But in quantitative, we talk about the measurement of the variables. We must measure our variables before we start the research. In qualitative, process is oriented. When you investigate or when you interview people or do a focus group discussion or you observe, so that process will lead you to discovery, from one respondent to another respondent. But in quantitative is outcome oriented. You want to find the cause, effect, or relationship between A and B. So this will be your the aim. So qualitative is control and important, but in quantitative the control is important. In qualitative we have a rich description of that phenomenon, but in quantitative we have precise measurement of the variables. In qualitative, we have basic element of analysis is words, as I say, but in quantitative, the basic element of analysis is numbers. In qualitative, we have uniqueness, but in quantitative, we have generalization. In qualitative, trustworthiness of the finding is there because we gather the data from the source, from the real source. But in quantitative, since we are using numbers, we have control of error. So this will show us the difference between an inductive and deductive logic of research. So in qualitative, usually most of the time we use inductive, even though that sometimes also we could use deductive, but usually qualitative we use inductive. As I say, we start from specific, then we go to the general, from the bottom to the top. Specific means that you have observed a phenomenon, for example, then you go and do an observation. You collect the data, gather information, whatever in interviews, focus group discussion, or your observation. Then you as a researcher, you will ask open-ended question to participant or record a field note. Then after that, you analyze the data to form teams and categories, and we will see that later how we are going to develop them. So if you have discovered that regularities or patterns, then you may have developed tentative hypothesis. So here, your researcher, you look, for above patterns generalization or theories from team or categories to develop that tentative hypothesis. Then when you develop maybe the theory, after you do that, you come to generalization of your finding or theories or to past experience and literature review. So you can see here literature review is the last thing that you are going to look, so that you can compare what you have found to what it is known. But for the deductive approach, which is mostly used in quantitative, so here you start with the theory. You have the theory, you have a phenomenon, you try to find the theory that explains that phenomenon. Then from the theory, you will develop an hypothesis. Actually, a hypothesis is a part of the theory. Hypothesis explain relationship, for example, between two variables, but the theory is a more complex on that. So after you developing the hypothesis from the theory, you come to you define your variables and measure them, so that you can collect the data. And after collecting the data, you analyze it and you come to your conclusion. So this is from top to bottom, or from general to specific. So we go back to the qualitative. What are the approach of qualitative research? So qualitative research, different assumption or approaches than quantitative research, of course, as we have seen just now. So the emphasis on seeing the world from the eye of the participant. So your participant is your source of knowledge. Your participant, drive you to discover the reality. So you strive to make sense of the phenomena in terms of the meaning people bring to them. So if you want to study about a culture of a group, so how you come to understand that culture, so those people will tell you about this culture. So the holistic emphasis means studying the person, the group, culture in their natural setting. So it is impossible, for example, if you want to study about homeless people and you do it via a phone conversation, maybe you call your friend that he has a friend experience that homelessness or something like that. No, you cannot do that. You must yourself go to homeless people, night or day, and you interview them and ask them to share their experience. So this graph will show us what is the relationship between the quantitative and qualitative. As you can see, in quantitative is straightforward from top to bottom. As we say, we define our research problem or question. What is the phenomenon that we want to study? What is the problem? What is the issue? We go and survey, literature review, and see what people have done or researchers have done about this and what they have not done. What theories can explain to us this problem? Then after we develop our or formulate our hypothesis. So after we formulate our hypothesis, we make the operational definition. We measure our variables. We define them. Then we design and select the instrument for the data, whatever it is, questionnaire or secondary data. So we obtain ethical approval if necessary. So then we go and collect the data, analyze the data, then interpret the finding, and we come to a conclusion. Fine. But in qualitative, it's totally different. So as we say, maybe we have selected a social, content and research, let's say homeless, people. Then of course we go here and explicate research belief, and we obtain our ethical approval, if possible, from the committee. And after we get in our approval of the ethical, so we straightforward we go. See who are our participants. So I say if I want to study about homelessness, then I go to homeless people, not others, friend of homeless people. I must go to homeless people themselves. After directly I will, without checking literature review or theories, I go and collect the data. By collecting data, the things here in quantitative, after all I collect the data and finish, only I analyze. But here in qualitative, while collecting the data, you're analyzing the data in the same time. If you feel that some of the information that you gathered from the respondent are not clear or need more clarification, you go back and collect the data. You keep go and come back until you reach the level of saturation, where when you interview more people, no new information is gathered. All the information are repeated. You understand that, okay, this is the level of saturation. Then you come to the concept formation and modification, where you describe your data and see what are the cause and the themes. You see what are the patterns or regularities. You develop your tentative hypothesis, and you come out to the theory development. So after you do that, if you feel that is not enough, then you go back, analyze, collect the data, and analyze, collect the data, come back. So after you're satisfied and the team emerge, the tentative hypothesis also already developed, then you go and establish scientific rigors of finding. Check if your finding makes sense, make logic, make scientific, understanding or no. If it is no, then you go back and collect the data again and analyze, collect, analyze. After finish, you go back and describe this data and redevelop your tentative hypothesis and adjust the theory development, and you keep doing that until you really your scientific findings are established. And there only you go and check literature review and compare what had been done before with what you have found. Then you draw your conclusion and write final report. So you can see here it is a cycle. You keep going, come back. Where in quantitative is straightforward from top to bottom. So what are the core activities in qualitative research? So a qualitative approach, we have literature review, even though, as I say, literature review at the end, we have explicating researcher belief. We have the role of participant. They are the subject or informant. We have a selection of participant and setting for data collection and approach to data analysis. So in literature review, as I say, conducted only after the data have been collected and analyzed. Not only collected but also analyzed. How we analyze qualitative data, as I said, we will discuss that in lecture number 3. Then after, what is the rationale for delaying the literature review? Why we don't see the literature review? Actually, there is a reason for that. First, to avoid leading the participant in the direction of what has been already discovered. Because if you go first and see literature review, you will have an idea about what is happening. Therefore, when you interview people, you may give them a leading question that lead those participants to answer you in a way that you mislead them. Basically, suppose they have a different understanding, but because you already influenced by literature review, you may ask the question that lead them to one direction. Also, the purpose of literature review is to show how current findings fit into what is already known, but this is only, as I say, once you already collected and analyzed the data. So, explicating researchers' belief, bracketing or setting aside one's bias and personal views on a topic. This is what we call bracketing. So you don't influence the respondent, you put your belief to yourself. So you, as an investigator, you keep a diary of personal thoughts and feeling about the topic. So the purpose, the researcher is made aware when interpretation of the data reflect the personal belief rather than those of the participant. So when you collect the data, when you get the information and start analyzing this data, make sure that you do not interfere in that interpretation. You do not say, oh, respondent mean it about this way. No. You should interpret the data the same way as respondent, perceive it, believe it, telling you. So if you have a doubt, you must go back to the respondent and ask them for clarification. So, subject or informer. So, people being studies are viewed as participant or informant, but not subject. They are not the subject to be studied. If you want to study poverty, so people are participant to explain to you how they experience poverty, but you cannot put them as themselves as poverty or as poor. So, viewed as an active participant in the research, they inform the researcher about the culture, about the belief, about the understanding. So you as a researcher, you must seek to understand the participant culture and knowledge, hence require learning about participant culture through ongoing discussion and involvement with them. So if you want to study a culture, for example, about Orang Asli here in Malaysia, you need to go and live with them, learn their language, eat, the same way they eat. You should not criticize their culture or make some what we say negative criticism on the culture. You should be as one of them, and therefore you can collect the data that you want. Selection of the participant. So we have a method called purposive sampling, where participants must have first-hand experience with research topic. As I say, example, homeless, gang involvement, or attending medical schools, and be able to talk about it. So if your research about gang involvement, you don't go and talk about people that have seen it in movie or something. No, you have to talk about people who really involved in gangs. You have to talk about gangsters, how you find them. You may go to the jail and ask permission to interview those people. So researcher establishes a clear criteria and rationale for sample selection, because the goal is not generalization of the finding as the quantitative, but it's a rich description of the phenomenon by those who have experienced it. You want to gather as much as you can information about phenomenon by those who experience it, and therefore you come to a conclusion about that phenomenon. What are the settings for data collection? So informant or participant, driven rather than theory driven. So your participant will, as I say, will drive you to the reality, not the theory. You don't have theory. You don't look at the theory. So investigator assumes ignorance of the culture or experience being studied. What have been studied, you just ignore it and don't look at it now. But informant teaches you as an investigator. They will tell you about the experience, about their culture. So the data is collected in the field, the natural world where people live and experience life. So you as an investigator, you should be a non-intrusive and also spend prolonged time in the field in order to get that data. So we have some researchers also use multiple methods for data collection. What are advantages and limitation of qualitative research? So qualitative research focuses on the world of human experience and the meaning ascribed to them by participants, which is that very good. They provide the researcher with a deep insight what would not be possible using the quantitative method. So you will understand or you will answer the question of how and why rather than only where quantitative can answer what. So, but the major strength of qualitative work is the validity of the data it produces, because that data is real data, it's a real people experience, So the one of them, I think the participant also to reality is likely to be reflected, and the major limitation here is its perceived lack of objectivity and generalizability, because we are dealing with different people. People have different perception, so it's a bit like subjective rather than objective, and sometimes it is very difficult to come to generalizability. We cannot generalize our finding, so researcher become the research tool and may lack the objectivity, another limitation, where the researcher interfere in the process of getting the information and analyzing the data, and therefore we may have bias finding also. So for qualitative data, we have three methods. We have ethnography, where we study about the culture or cultural group. Here we describe cultural or groups or culture, or the discipline from cultural anthropology. And we have the second one, grounded theory. From the name you will know, it is about developing theory. So the study focus about also cultural groups. The analytics focus is about generate theory about the basic social process, and discipline about is sociology or criminology. So the last one, phenomenology, where the focus is more about individual experience like earthquake, homeless, gangsters, and these kind of things. And the analytics focus is about discern the essence of the lived experience. In discipline, we use mostly to philosophy, psychology, and sociology. Let's go and see one by one. The first, ethnography. So ethnography is, as I say, the focus is about study human behavior in the cultural context in which it is embedded. If you want to study about original people in Malaysia, in Orang Asli, so your focus will be about their culture. You need to go to their place and live with them. So ethnography is the work of describing a culture, the way of life of the cultural group associated with cultural anthropology. Example here, we have one study by David Count and Dorothy Ayer. They have written a book on ethnography of Irving seniors. They study the culture of those retired people who use the Irving. Irving is a car attached, or a house attached to the car, and they can live wherever they want. They go to so many different places. They just park the car with the attached house and live. So these two researchers, they study this culture. They did an ethnography of the Irving seniors. So also the ethnography approach to qualitative research come largely from the field of anthropology. The emphasis in anthropology is on studying the entire culture. Originally, the idea of the culture was tied to the notion of ethnicity and geographic location. For example, as I said, the culture, of the Trobriand Islands. But it has later been broadened to include virtually, any group of organization. We can study the culture of a business or defined group, for example, business club. Ethnography is an extremely broad area with a great variety of practitioners and methods. However, the most common ethnographic approach is participant observation as a part of the field research. So the ethnographer becomes immersed in the culture as an active participant and record extensive field note. As in grounded theory, there is no preset limiting of what will be observed, and no real ending point in the ethnographic study. And the second one is grounded theory. The focus is, as I say here, to develop the theory to explain underlying social process of a cultural group. It's also about cultural group, but it's not only about studying the culture, but to develop theory to explain that culture. So it is very useful in areas where little is known or when a new perspective is needed. So used for exploratory and descriptive studies mainly. So also because the theory emerged from the data, so that it's called grounded theory, or grounded in the data, foundation in symbolic interactionism. Example for that, we have Carideli and social construction of fatherhood. So you can see the book from Google's book, and then you can have an idea about the book. So the grounded theory also is a qualitative research approach that was originally developed by Glasser and Strauss in the late of 1960. The self-defined purpose of grounded theory is to develop theory about phenomena of interest. But this is not just abstract theorizing they are talking about. Instead, the theory needs to be grounded or rooted in observation. Hence, the term come. So grounded theory is a complex, iterative process. The research begins with the rising of generative questions which help to guide the researcher, but are not intended to be either static or confining. As the researcher begins to gather the data, core theoretical concepts are identified, or we call them the domain or the categories or the themes. So after that, tentative linkages between those categories themes are developed, and here theoretical core concept emerge from the data. So this early phase of the research tend to be very open and can take months and years. So later, after you link or you establish the linkage between these concept or themes or categories, then the researcher is more engaged in verification and summary to validate what you have found. So the effort tend to evolve toward one core category that is central. So the last method is phenomenology, where the focus is about individual experience. So reveal the meaning of the lived experience from the perspective of participant. Describe the essence of lived experience. Essence means the element related to the true meaning of something that gives common understanding to the phenomenon under study. So conveyed with descriptive language, we have a huge description about the experience that people live, and drawn from this philosophy used across disciplines. So an example we have Solchani. He has written a book as a phenomenological study of women's pre-adoptive experiences, or sorry, pre-adoptive experiences. So the phenomenology is also sometimes considered a philosophical perspective as well as an approach to qualitative methodology. It has a long history in several social research disciplines, including psychology, sociology, and social work. And also, phenomenology is a school of thought that emphasizes focus on people's subjective experiences and interpretation of the world. So the knowledge we got it from the participant. How people experience phenomenon or experience situations, scenarios, and how they explain to us these experiences. So that is, the phenomenologists want to understand how the world appears to others. So those are the three type of qualitative research. Then how about data collection methods in qualitative research? So we have three data collection strategies introduced. We have participant observation, we have in-depth interviews, and we have focus group interviews. So qualitative researcher may combine more than one method. You may have participant observation, you as a researcher, you observe with in-depth interviews, or may participant observation with focus group interviews, or three of them, you can mix. So we start with the first, participant observation. Intensive, usually long-term examination of social group or an organization. You as a researcher, you are going to take notes in the field, observing, for maybe years. So the researcher becomes a participant in the life of the group members. So you as an observer, you observe their behavior and learn meaning system which are tied to the language. So the first thing that, as I say previously, you have to do is to learn the language. That is a requirement for the data collection in qualitative. Most closely associated with ethnography as developed in classical anthropology and now done in a variety of discipline, this observation. Then we have, what are the steps involved in participant observation research? So here we have gaining entry into the group. We have two. If you want to study a formal organization, for example, a government or a multinational companies or a business club, and then you need a formal, entry where you need to write a formal letter and to get permission and request, a permission to interview those people. But if your study is more about, let's say, people cultures, about Orang Asli, for example, that is an informal group, you may use different strategies. You may approach some of your friends that they have a good connection with those people, and they will, link you to them. So also, the second, developing and maintaining rapport. You as a researcher, you must work hard to develop and maintain a good relationship in the field. So as I said, the first thing, you need to understand the language and talk the language. Now the second thing is you don't criticize them. Don't criticize, their culture. Your job is to gather information, to gather data and analyze it to come out with a theory or with an explanation. So also developing a method for taking field notes, that is very important. How you're going to take this information. Field notes integral to participant observation. You may include description and interpretation of individuals' interaction and events. You must distinguish descriptions from interpretation. Description when you are describing, interpretation when you are doing interpretation or understanding that description. Also record time and location of observations, as well as the key informant, the weather, the event happening, and their significance. And the last is integrating data collection, data analysis. So organizing field note into different type of file facilitate data analysis. Remember, while you are doing data collection, at the same time you are doing data analysis. So the second option or method of data collection in-depth interviews, where some studies cannot employ the participant observation method. So in-depth interviews allow participants to describe their experiences and the meaning of events taking place in their lives. So it's mostly to a phenomenology perspective. So interviews are flexible and allow for probing. So interview method is quite diverse and adaptive. You have so many ways of how you conduct interviews. So Spurley gave three key elements for the interview method to be successful. First, he said that it must be an explicit purpose, where the researcher and informant are aware that the discussion has a purpose. So when you go and interview people, you must brief them about the research. What are the expectations? What you want to do or to research. So ethnographic explanation, where the researcher ties out explanation to the participant to see if they make sense. So you encourage the informant or the participant to use colloquial language and teach the researcher its meaning. If they have what we call slangs or or some words that you don't understand. So you ask the participant to explain to you. And we have ethnographic questions. We include descriptive questions. Ask participants to describe their experiences, for example, their ideas, circumstances, viewpoint, dilemma. And structural question where you ask participants how they organize the work. For example, what activities they use, how they eat, you know, how what they believe, how they worship. Then contrast question, you ask participant what is mean about specific terminology. If they use a terminology that you don't understand, or then you have to ask for that to explain to you. Then the last or the third type of data collection is focus group interviews. So here interviews also, but it is in group rather than individual. So the setting between 6 to 12 participants with a common experience. So this focus group, discussion back to 1940 used to assess the effectiveness of moral boosting radio shows. In 1970 onward, used by the market researchers, and in 80s onward, used by academics. So it is new for us only for maybe 40 years. So transcripts of discussion is the data. So plus accompanying notes, use a content analysis or grounded theory approach to analyze the data. So what are the strengths? The strength is it is open-ended question, same like interview, spontaneously deal with the issues as they arise, and also very cost-effective method of collecting data, because you are going together 12 people and get with them information in one time, so it is less time consuming. But there is also weaknesses. The weaknesses is among these 6 to 12 participants, you may have only one or two participants that dominate the discussion. Others, they just keep listening, or and also you may have conflict between two or three participants, because one is from this side A, one from side B. For example, you want to study some programs of government applied, for example, poor people. You gather policy makers with NGOs, for example, and a conflict maybe start. Government saying that what NGOs are explaining is not true. NGOs saying that what government is doing is not correct, and you may have a conflict. So another thing is not done in natural setting. So little observation to help understand the experience of the participant. So even if you want to study about poverty and you do focus group discussion, you might have the focus group discussion in a very comfortable place, in a hotel or conference room. So this is the first part of the qualitative the data analysis. We have described its meaning, how we use it, what are the type of qualitative data, qualitative research, how we collect the data. We have, we say, three types, observation, interviews, and focus group discussion. So in the next class, we will also give a brief description or discussion about quantitative research method. Then after that, only in lecture number 4, in lecture number 3, we will discuss about the data analysis for qualitative research. I hope that you enjoy this lecture. If you have any question, you can write your comment down, and I will answer them as soon as I can. Thank you very much.